All right, hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode where we're going to talk about Hit and Run OCD and also the treatment process for it. So again, my name is Matt Codde. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I specialize in OCD and anxiety. And again, in this episode, I want to talk about a specific form of OCD called Hit and Run OCD. And this is, again, in our series on intrusive thoughts. And so, when we talk about Hit and Run OCD, this is a very common form of OCD. And it's, just to quickly define it, it's a form of OCD where people will be driving, usually their vehicle, and they'll have a doubt or a thought that they may or may not have hit someone with their car or have run someone over or hit something, like a mailbox or a trash can, an accident or another person's car. And, then they'll feel a sense of guilt and doubt because of it, which will cause them to engage in different compulsions to try to remedy the thoughts and anxiety, right? And that's that OCD loop that we talk about, where it's, obsessions, anxiety, and then compulsions and relief. And when all four of those connect, it just tends to build upon itself. So, what I want to talk about today is kind of a case study of, someone with this particular form of OCD and how, we've gone about working with them to overcome it in the past. And again, this is going to be a combination of people that I've worked with. So it's going to be a fictional character, but the idea remains the same. So that's the kind of main takeaway for this particular episode. So when someone comes with Hit and Run OCD, oftentimes one of the major compulsions that they're going to do is avoid driving, right? And so they'll constantly look to try to have someone else drive them. They may take Ubers or taxis or Lyfts or the public transportation to avoid driving. Now, what we need to understand about that, though, is that just strengthens the OCD cycle, right? And so if you have those intrusive thoughts of, oh, well, what if I hit someone? And when you're driving and that makes you anxious, but then you avoid driving, what that does is that reinforces those thoughts. So those thoughts are more likely to come up in the future, right? And so other common compulsions that people will do. So just to summarize some basic thoughts, it's what if I hit someone? What if I ran someone over? What if I, like that is the overall umbrella theme. Now that can take on various forms. It might be a certain person, it might be a car, vehicle, whatever. But that's that idea of a hit and run OCD. I hit something and I left the scene without going back to know if I really did. So compulsions that I've seen people perform include things like driving the same exact loop they just drove to go check to make sure that no one got hurt, right? Or there was no ambulance or, something like that along the route. And what happens is that they'll drive the loop back. Let's say they drove to work, they'll drive back home and then they'll drive back to work, but then they'll think that they may have hit someone that next time. So they end up just driving the same loop again and again and again. Other compulsions include, like mentally reassuring yourself, constantly checking rear view mirrors, this and that, to always make sure, no one got hit. Reassurance, calling people to, have them reassure you. I've even seen people go as far as calling like hospitals or morgues to see if anyone was struck by a vehicle, and again, the brain can get very creative on possibilities as we know with anxiety and OCD. So what I want to talk about is kind of how I've worked with people in the past that have had this and, how we can have success with this treatment. So again, let's first define what success with this particular form of OCD is. Success ultimately is the removal of all compulsions, right? It's not that the person has to feel completely anxiety-free or never have thoughts like this again, because if we aim for those goals in treatment, we're not going to hit them. Right. In fact, we're probably going to make them worse. And that's ultimately, where most people go wrong with OCD treatment, right, is they start with the goal of not having intrusive thoughts and not experiencing anxiety because they, again, assume because the anxiety is uncomfortable and because the thoughts are uncomfortable that is the problem. But the reality is that when you do compulsions, it reinforces those thoughts, which only make the feeling stronger, which then again creates that loop and cycle and ultimately spirals and spirals and spirals. And the more OCD spirals, the more it limits your life, right? So the goal ultimately is to have the person become as individual as possible when it comes to transporting themselves and to drive as much as possible, right? And so we don't want to do anything that's reinforcing the OCD. So first and foremost, we want to eliminate the compulsions, right? And once we eliminate the compulsions, which include all the checking, things like that, then we actually want to go ahead and drive, right? And so, with people with OCD, it's not, or hit and run OCD, generally I'll follow them in my car and their car, and we'll drive, maybe certain little loops at first, just to get comfortable driving. And it's the same habituation process though, right? We start off kind of small, easy drives, then we'll go on more complicated drives. We may drive, if they're uncomfortable driving around schools, we'll go drive around schools. If we're uncomfortable on the freeway, we'll go to the freeway. It's wherever the OCD is very sensitive, we want to start attacking those places, right? And really habituating to those places so that normal driving is easier and easier and easier. And again, when they stop driving, that's usually when the hit and run OCD will kick in. And it's, oh, well, what if I hit someone back there and I didn't see? And so what you need to do at that point is ultimately sit with that uncertainty and doubt, and just kind of, okay, well, you know what? That's possible, I guess. And when you sit with that anxiety is going to kind of bubble up. And as you sit with it and don't do compulsions, it will go down over time. And what happens is when you let the anxiety go down over time, that's called habituation. Ultimately, you're not feeding those thoughts, and ultimately you're not you're not reinforcing that loop. Because again, the whole point of the treatment process is to let the anxiety drop on its own without compulsions, so you're not training your brain that these thoughts are dangerous or something that you really need to be considering as a threat. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense on that process. So and then eventually you'll go into higher things. Like I've had people write narratives about hitting someone. I've stood in front of someone's car, where they're sitting there and afraid that they're gonna step on the gas and run me over. So I mean, I've done things like that. But again, this is something that I've worked with. I've also heard of people like laying down something like a bag or something, like the bag of sand or something in the road, and having them run over the like drive over the sand to feel the bump. There's creative ways of doing that, of facing it. But again, you want to make sure that you're doing this with a qualified professional if this is something that you're looking at getting help for. But I just wanted to talk about kind of the overall concept of what it is and how you would go about treating it, kind of just in theory, right? Based on people that I've worked with, and also just OCD treatment in general. So again, the one thing that we don't want to do is accommodate and avoid driving. We want to face the fear head on. We want to do the things and challenge the OCD head on, because again, that's what's ultimately going to get you better. It's compulsion removal, not anxiety or thought removal. That is the goal of the treatment process. And so, so just to quickly summarize, hit and run OCD is the idea of thoughts about whether or not you hit someone when you were driving, or ran someone over, hurt someone. And the compulsions usually include checking, reassurance, looping back and checking, avoiding driving, trying to get other people to drive you places. So being proactive and actually going and driving, things like that. That's really what we're looking for with individuals with this specific subtype. And so again, that summary is just, that's what it is. And then the compulsion removal and to drive as much as possible is really the goal of the recovery process. And so hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, if you found this helpful, please, subscribe, click the link, like button below, comment. And then we also have some additional free resources down below in the links, so that you can, we have assessments, guides, stuff to help you on your journey if this is something that you're dealing with, over at our site, restoredminds.com. And so thank you so much for hanging out with us on this episode. It's been fun as always. And so we're going to keep continuing on this intrusive thought series. So we'll see you next week with a whole nother episode on responsibility OCD. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.